Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Hello, my name is Erin Axelrod, a partner, worker, owner at Lift Economy, and I'm so excited to be joined today by Fabiola Santiago. She was born in Oaxaca and raised in California. She is a diasporic Zapotec from the mezcal-making pueblo of Santiago, Matatlan, the world capital of mezcal. Her experiences as a formerly undocumented person and her connection to Oaxaca's rich culture, particularly as a descendant of mezcal producers, anchors her commitment to community, equity, and possibility. As founder and executive director of Mi Oaxaca, she leads the organization which preserves Oaxaca's indigenous food and beverage cultures through narrative change, education, and collaboration with compatible organizations across borders. With 15 years of experience at the intersection of community health and social change, she has driven local and national policy changes and empowered marginalized communities through public health research, narrative strategy, and popular education. Beyond her professional work, Fabiola embraces motherhood as an opportunity to nurture cultural roots and values in the next generation. And she's a graduate of our Next Economy MBA program. Fabiola, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Erin. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to start with this question of how are you thinking of home right now these days? And, sharing anything that's alive for you around where you're sitting right now and where you're calling in from.
That's such a powerful first question because I have actually been sitting with that. Where is home? Especially in this era of mass deportations and abductions, I've been thinking a lot, where is home? My parents were deported 10, 12 years ago, and so they're back in our pueblo in Santiago, Matatlan. So what folks are experiencing right now is something that I've already been through. And I was also en route, or I was about to get deported as well. But essentially, I got married and I was able to stay and complete my master's, and I did want to stay. And the reason why I'm sharing this story and just getting to the point is because the US or California has felt like home in a lot of ways because coming at the age of 6, there's a lot of memories that I have here. And I've been thinking about going back, or I've thought about it, but I haven't gone back. I know there's a lot of folks who are going back, some by choice and some because living here in the US is just too scary at this moment. And they'd rather, do it on their terms. I have not because I have a child, but at the same time, we're pretty removed from our family and our extended relatives. I live in a city or in a county, in a town that I don't know people. I just moved here. And I've been thinking about how do I make this place feel like home? Because this is where I want to be right now. This is where my son is from as well. He has ancestral roots here. And I think for me, home is wherever we choose that we feel a deep sense of belonging and that the place that we choose also chooses us. I was in Oakland for 12 years or so, 11, and I moved to another county where there's a bigger Oaxacan population. And so it is starting to feel like home here. And I think for me right now, it's a matter of figuring out how I can be of service to this new community. Because having gone back to Oaxaca for extended periods of time and giving my service there, that is what creates belonging. It's when you're able to be of service to our communities. That's when people know who we are, what our values are, that we are there to contribute. And so in that same spirit, I'm coming here to this new county, ready to be of service and see where Mi Oaxaca fits and where our family fits in here.
What an incredible response to that profound question. And going into Mi Oaxaca a little bit, could you share, a little bit of the context for folks around why Mi Oaxaca is so important, why it's needed, and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, Mi Oaxaca got started in 2019 or so as a food pop-up idea of making a goat barbacoa and mezcal in the Bay Area, in the East Bay in particular, because what I was seeing and what I was witnessing is more Oaxacan cultural appropriation. Restaurants serving Oaxacan food, dishes, all of a sudden seeing a bunch of mezcal, which is a distillate made from the agave plant, or maguey as we call it in Spanish. And just seeing, on one hand, feeling pride that I'm seeing Oaxacan food be elevated and mezcal be on menus. On the other hand, seeing how it was being presented, it was being misrepresented. And given some of the history or like the practices of restaurants, it was actually being appropriated because they weren't giving credit where credit was due. There's allegations of wage theft and cultural theft. And so that was the moment where I decided I can also do a restaurant. And I worked in the service industry for about 10 years. I know how to cook some of these dishes. And I did. I was accepted into the food incubator La Cocina in San Francisco. But we started our training in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, which was right when the pandemic started and we all sheltered in place. So we couldn't finish our in-person commercial kitchen training. So that's actually when I went back to Oaxaca, and I went back to the Pueblo where I'm from. And then what I experienced and witnessed there was that mezcal was still booming. I spoke to so many of our relatives are mezcal producers. So the stories are just there. I'm swimming in stories and experiences of folks who are sharing that they're not getting paid, that people are coming and buying at large volumes. I started reading a little bit more about the industry, learning just like the number of brands skyrocketing, that the majority of the brands are not owned by producers. They're investors, business people, conglomerates, people who are not from Oaxaca. And I do want to note here that even people from other states of Mexico were coming in, because Oaxaca is one of the states in Mexico with the largest indigenous populations, highest poverty rates, and lowest educational attainment. So as somebody who has been in public health and looks at systems, these patterns to me speak large inequities. And it seems that there is this campaign or this strategy to go after Oaxaca because it is one of the states with rich culture in language and people and biodiversity and cultural diversity. And that's where people are trying to go and find reconnection. But they forget that in the US and even in Mexico, Oaxaca has been one of the most disenfranchised states, and we have been one of the most belittled people here in the US. We have evidence on social media where people still call us derogatory names, and even LA City Council a few years ago, there was an audio that was leaked to them speaking very poorly of their Oaxacan constituents. And so for me, it is important to highlight the indigenous roots and not just to Mexicanize Oaxacan culture. So considering that I had been in the restaurant industry and know how it operates during the pandemic, I saw also how fragile the restaurant industry is. And I said, I will not sign up for this. So instead, I pivoted to do more cultural education and narrative change with Oaxacan food and calling it Mi Oaxaca, keeping the name. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when I first came across your work, I saw your Instagram Oaxaca Talk. And it just maybe many of our listeners can resonate with this flood of interest, folks visiting Oaxaca as tourists. And could you speak to that a little bit, and what patterns you've observed and what patterns Mi Oaxaca is seeking to foster or nurture to benefit the Oaxacan community?
Yeah. I mean, I got my green card in 2013. So the moment I got it, it took me 5 days to book a flight and go back. And interestingly, I will answer the question, but I think this part is important too, that when I got there, all the memories came back, all the remembrance of oh wait, I'm not just Mexican. I'm Oaxaqueña and I have Zapotec roots. My parents spoke growing up in our home, Zapoteco. And I understand it, I can speak it. And I'm wow, there's just so much more depth to my identity than saying that I'm Mexican. We didn't really frequent the city. Where I would go was our pueblo, the town where we're from. But the few times that we would go to the city, it was just to run some errands, get some stuff, big shopping stuff or whatever. And I could tell you that the city was not looking the way that it looks now. And over time, as I've gone back, I have frequented the city and seen that the tourism is hard and strong. And I've seen, smaller or like more people oriented efforts on the ground, really naming the gentrification and the displacement and calling out or naming it like the touristification of just people being, displaced because they can't pay the rents, water shortages, hotels, Airbnbs, buying illicitly purchasing water that locals don't have access to. Just, that doesn't affect us in the pueblo as much, that we have different set of problems. But in the city, those are the things that are affecting people. And so, over time, like I go to the city and I'm just like, I feel like I'm just in the US, in the sense that if I go to a restaurant, all the people look, pretty well off. They mostly white, a lot of tourists. And what gets presented on those plates it's a palatable way of taking in culture and not really as authentic. It is beautiful. And it's this question of like, who owns this restaurant? And it's like the same thing, like a majority of businesses in Oaxaca City are not owned by Oaxacan people. So it's like, whether it's in the US or whether it's there, it just seems like there are so many, in this case, economic inequities, in addition to the cultural inequities as well. And so I, through Mi Oaxaca and as a researcher, I was curious to understand how folks who are in the service industry in Oaxaca are experiencing this boom. So we did a community-based research project in 2023 where we held focus groups with folks in the service industry and people who work in the tourism industry and get their insights. Like, how is this? Like, what do you think of this? Do you like it? Because I don't, but that's my bias. And so, some people shared interesting insights about those experiences. And I think most people, based on their responses, like they don't actually have negative experiences with tourists. I mean, some of them do, but across the board, the majority of them understand that like there's an identity component to the cultural component, that it's not just Mexican culture, that like there are nuances in the foods and in mezcal production that like they want to teach about or want to like share those learnings. And so, when we asked them as well, like how could an organization like Mi Oaxaca or this like small nonprofit, or we weren't a nonprofit, but like this startup organization, like support this? And I think one of the things that came out from that was like education, culture education. So our programs are informed by some of those findings. I think that there is definitely a big need for education in Oaxaca in the sense of like how to interact with tourists, how to give folks like different trainings and resources so that they know how to interact more equitably with folks who come and visit. But Mi Oaxaca is mostly run by me. I'm a mother and my child is here. So most of our programmings are starting here in the US, in California, educating consumers and educating folks who may be visiting, because ultimately they're the ones that need to make some changes in their behaviors.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have hope that the interest in Oaxacan culture can be a beneficial force for the Oaxacan community? And if so, how would that look?
It can. I mean, I think that's why Mi Oaxaca still exists and or like is here. Yeah. I think our reach maybe is a little bit limited right now, because in the spirit of Next Economy, in the spirit of what I learned in that course, is designing our own lives. And so for us, it means having a 32-hour work week, because as a single parent, there's just no way I could do 40 hours. It's too much. I know that's not the question you asked, but I think that it can, if people are using this opportunity right now, it's happening in the world, to pause and slow down and consider, where's our food coming from? Where is the stuff that we consume coming from? And not just our food, but our clothes, the things that we put in, our hair, our body, all the stuff. I think that there can be an opportunity But sadly, I think what I'm seeing more of is that people are just bypassing and superficially connecting with the people and the culture. I think, I don't know. I don't know what Mexico as a whole has in store for Oaxaca because those are big forces. And in the previous years, there has been a big push to make Oaxaca a top travel destination and really just like, the development and the investment, not for local people, but for visitors and for tourists. And so when we have that on one hand, the question becomes like, how do we resist? I don't think it's resisting those forces, but it is actually maybe taking what we have learned from our pueblos and from our people and our ancestors and integrating it in our lives and whatever other workplaces or life, other areas of our lives is one way. And at least that's what we're doing with Mi Oaxaca. It is here to say, like, these are the practices that we have in Oaxaca. We're not there yet. Like, we're not situated in Oaxaca, but we are in California. There's like a huge Oaxaca population in California. And part of this work is to remember how we used to be and what the spirit of, for example, Guelaguetza really is, the spirit of reciprocity, the practices around our food and what they were really meant for, and not just, or mezcal in this case, which is, it was never intended to be in a tasting menu or like, Europeanized, because that's what's happening to mezcal right now. It's being forced into a European standard of consumption or American or Western or whatever we want to call it, but it's not indigenous and it's not true to the original culture and context.
I know you have an event coming up in October. Would you be willing to share a little bit for our listeners around Guelaguetza and what that is? Just to give folks a taster of what your programming is and what it's like and what it could be to engage in something that
For
is
sure.
narrative shifting.
Well, we're calling it Guelaguetza, which, I know galas are a thing and maybe not really anymore. Times change, but it's a play on a word with the word Guelaguetza, which is a Zapotec word. And more importantly, it's a practice and a life way of how people in a pueblo interact with each other through gifts, through service, through commitment. Each pueblo has a way of creating their own Guelaguetza systems. But this is very different than the Guelaguetza that we see today in the city, which is just this big festival, quote unquote, that happens in the month of July, which is very tourist centric. It's more like a performance, or as other people have said, it's folklorico. It's dance and it's music, but it's not really like people interacting with each other in the true spirit. So our intention is to kind of bring in some of those practices of reciprocity, of service, of care. And we're inviting people to join us, yes, on Friday, October 17th, starting at 6 p.m. at Tradición Peruana Cultural Center in the Mission in SF. And at that event, we'll be sharing more of the findings. I mean, we had a lot of interviews, a lot of focus groups, more of the findings from folks that participated in the research project. And we want to do that because some of those voices will only be heard in that space or in the programs that we have because they'll never be able to step foot in the US because there is no equitable way or there is no clear, transparent, fair way of coming to the US, right? And some people sure don't want to, but we'll be sharing some of those stories, some of that knowledge that people would otherwise not hear. So it's going to be sharing of that, but we'll also have mezcal directly from producers. And we want to be intentional about that because I have been, and part of the research, for Mi Oaxaca was to like understand how mezcal is being marketed and how people are engaging with it in the US. So I have gone to events. Most of those events are with the purposes of getting people drunk. And it is not with the purposes of education, or it is not really intended to like engage and build the relationship with the spirit in a way that like is healthier for humans and also the planet. Because what, this mezcal boom is doing, it's essentially pushing mass consumerism, right? And so when that happens, what we're seeing is that it damages the pueblos back home, from like the rivers to the biodiversity to the monocropping, like all these things. And so one thing that we really want to do with this event is to invite people to be more mindful about how they engage with mezcal. It's going to be kind of like this way of also doing a tasting without doing the tasting, where, at maybe like different intervals, we'll be presenting a different mezcal. And also like understanding it beyond like the normative ways of tasting of like the flavors and the aromas, but like the feelings. Because we've, in some of our conversations with folks, we talk about like, okay, but do you taste those things, or like, is that just, when people do tastings, like, I don't taste that. But for some people, it's not the taste, it's a feeling. So it's more of like a embodied experience that we're trying to invite people to partake in. We'll have an auction and a mini mercado and more like an exhibit style experience for people to engage with materials as well. And it's also a big celebration that we got our 501c3 designation earlier this year. So yes, would love for folks to come and check it out and understand mezcal through a very different lens.
Well, and I'm so grateful also to the spirit of you sharing around the true origins of that cultural practice. Goodness knows we need better mechanisms for reciprocity and mutuality and service in our culture right now. And so, yeah, that to me feels potent as well in this celebration, just elevating and really naming there are other ways to be in reciprocity that are more than financial and rooted in community. And I wonder if you have anything else to speak on around that.
Yeah. One of the things that we're also, our other programs, the cultural education piece that we have is, well, it's this 6-week course. It's called An Introduction to Mezcal Through Indigenous Worldviews. And while that's open to the general public, anybody who wants to learn more about like where their mezcal comes from, Oaxacan folks of living in diaspora like me who like don't actually know too much about the mezcal industry or production processes, as well as folks in the spirits industry and hospitality industry. The intention of that is to enhance people's critical thinking skills, to start questioning marketing ploys, and to start integrating some more equitable practices into their service, their businesses, whatever thing that they have going on, or however they engage with mezcal in Oaxacan culture, to just do like, take 1 or 2 small steps to do things differently. We're not asking for radical change, though obviously, that would be great. But it is more like, if you are a consultant or if you are a bartender, how can you integrate like 1 or 2 nuggets of knowledge with your customers or your clients? Like, did you know that it takes 10 years for this particular agave to grow? Just something like that could just like, people can, now they're drinking it, hopefully, right? And they're like, wow, this isn't grapes. This isn't like, we don't get a new batch every year. Once the plant is used, that's it. It has one life. Or did you know that this mezcal comes from Oaxaca and it's created in a town that like still speaks Zapotec? X% of the inhabitants and residents still speak Zapotec. And it tells people this story of like, okay, like Indigenous people are still here. They're not in the past, and some don't need to reconnect because they're still connected. But it's this narrative change, right, that we're trying to do in everything that we do. And that's what reciprocity looks like. It's not saying like, hey, non-Oaxacan people shouldn't have a Oaxacan restaurant or Oaxacan inspired, but at least give credit where credit is due and like speak us into existence. Because without that culture, that knowledge, those systems, there would be no mezcal industry. There would be no Oaxacan inspired restaurant. So like, it is giving gratitude to the people who have made you who you are, and, make your job a possibility and your income a possibility.
Incredible. Are there other programs you would want to share for our listeners to know about too?
We're still trying to figure out other programs. We have, the first one is like, it's more like education and to activate the critical thinking. And then, a lot of folks, or maybe not a lot, but there is a desire, even for us. Okay, so what happens? And this is taking a public health approach where when we want to see behavior change, the first thing that people need is awareness and education, because if they're not aware that something is a problem or that something is harmful for them, they cannot make those changes. What comes after that is like, they need some resources and tools. So for future years, the idea is to have some pathways or something more tangible so people can like put that knowledge into practice. I don't know if we want to call it a workforce development program or some sort of training where people can actually put them into practice. And it's not just something that they come and they learn and then they figure it out on their own. We want to walk alongside them in this process should they be invested. Because I think that's what a lot of times happens, right? Like there's like an intention, but then there's like no follow through. So that's where we would like to go. And, I don't know. Who knows what's in store for us? It's such a tricky thing to do these strategic plans or to think like, what do we want 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? Because of the conditions that we live in today, right? And yeah, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of daydreaming and possibilities, but time will tell, if people are on board, because like anything, we need people, we need community, we need each other to make these things happen. And if we want to be drinking real mezcal, not like some adulterated version that's just there to get us like inebriated, then yeah, hopefully people can support this work that way.
I would be so curious if you have a few more moments to share a little bit more too around the biodiversity context of the agave, or you said
Maguey.
And just, I know you've spoken a lot about like the land that these plants are coming from and how that connects to the integrity of the spirit. And yeah, if you could just share a little bit too around that and that relationship.
Sure. Yeah. And for listeners, I forgot to mention that I use the word maguey as opposed to agave. Agave is the botanical word that's used to classify the plants, but maguey is the Spanish colloquial regional word for the plant. And when people name it, it's more regional. So I try to stick to that as opposed to agave, which is kind of like, I take it as like, it's kind of like people saying I'm, giving more specificity to their ethnicity, but lumping them all into Latino. Right. So for me, maguey gives more specificity. So another thing about maguey is that Oaxaca is one of the states in Mexico with the largest endemic variety of maguey. So yes, they grow throughout Mexico and even the Americas. I mean, we have them here in California. We have them in the Southwest, all the way down to like Latin America. But the Oaxaca holds like the heart of where the ones that are endemic to that region come from. That's also true, I should say, for corn, chiles, and other spices and seeds and foods that we consider very Mexican. Yes, they can be found, but like that's where it's concentrated in terms of diversity that are endemic to those regions. So that being said, Valles Centrales, Oaxaca is divided into 8 regions. Valles Centrales is the region where a lot of the mezcal production comes from, and that's where a lot of agave grow. But they grow all over Oaxaca, and they each have, so back to the name, for example, in the Sierra Sur, some people, they'll call a maguey by a certain name that doesn't exist in the Valles Centrales. And that's because like each plant has like a home already. Like I think that's so cute and beautiful. That's like, I'm only going to grow here. And, there is that connection between like the soil, because there's also diversity of soil. And so some of them, is more like rocky. And it's really fascinating when you can see like maguey growing like from rocks or like, harder ground. And then in some places it's like more like that rich red dirt and it grows there too. And so those are influences for the taste and the flavor in the mezcal. And what's happening right now is that we're also seeing people take out agave that are endemic to Oaxaca and taking it out of its context, which needs to be done carefully because we don't know how it's going to react. I'm not a botanist or anything, but I read and I hear that it could, and not just like botanists, but even like, my parents who grew up in the campo, especially my dad, will be like, yeah, sometimes some plants don't interact well with each other and one can cause the other one to be sick or like diseases. So when people are doing that, I mean, it's just like, it is this thing of like taking something without permission, right? It's like the entitlement of like, I'm just going to take this plant and not ask if it's okay. And yeah, it could lead to an imbalance of like the biodiversity. The other thing that we're seeing is that they're being brought here in the United States. And so now here in the US, we're starting to see an agave economy just start. And yeah, we don't know where that's going to lead us, but it really does just go back to the practice of like asking for permission. And I know for people who did not grow up with that culture or that life way or that lens or that perspective of like asking plants for permission to be taken, it's weird and like maybe a little, it just doesn't make sense to them. But for us, or for me, it doesn't make sense to take something that's not yours and that you're not in a relationship with. And I think that's what differentiates like Western lifeways and worldviews versus like non-Western, because, you know, each indigenous group and people have their own ways as well. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And you said this agave economy in the US, you know, I've read about the monocultures and yeah, having it be done in a way that's just perpetuating some of the same systemic problems of industrialized agriculture that's so harmful. And I really appreciated too the way you described this maguey growing out of rocks and just thinking about the constituents of this plant where sugar is such a precious resource. And this plant grows out of these rugged terrain and gifts us with sugar, syrup, all this incredible life force to create all these beautiful products. Not even to touch on I think there's textile application too with maguey. And gosh, what an incredible gift.
It's really a teacher plant. I'm a little bit just at, I don't know what the word is, but I am a little bit, I don't know, I just scratch my head seeing how this plant is taken out of context in so many ways. I didn't mention it, but you did, right? Like that this plant gives sugar, textiles, rope, housing, clothes, medicine, like so much that it can give. And yet we're just like diluting it into an alcohol or distilling it, which is, I'm not against. I mean, there's a cultural element to that. But then we're literally monoculturing a plant. You're not just monocropping, but literally making it that you associate a plant with an alcohol. It's like, but it has so much more to give. And so it's the same idea of like putting a plant in a box. This is what it's for. And the plant, like the fact that it has one life and in its lifetime, like it takes very long to grow. I think in a culture in the US where we want, you know, instant gratification and we want like a fast fashion, fast food, fast everything. I mean, we live in that. The maguey plant is like, no, I'm going to take 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years to grow. You can't touch, and I have nothing to give you until I've reached maturity, and you're going to wait. I think that's some people can wait. I mean, I don't know that people know, but sometimes like agave are harvested prematurely and they make tequila out of it or even mezcal now. But see, the person that doesn't know what true mezcal tastes like, to them, it's going to be irrelevant. But you know, if you read an avocado that's still too hard, could you imagine? But versus like a really ripe one, like there's a difference. But if you don't know what good tastes like, you won't know that they're feeding you and then they're like just bottling stuff that doesn't even taste good. But that's the point of waiting, right? Like you wait till it's ready to give. And we need to be on its timeline, not the other way around. And right now, the alcohol industry is in its own timeline. And yeah, I think some other folks some elders have said, and producers, if, you know, we could be seeing the end of mezcal and it's like this distillate if we continue to rush. And so I think that's like a lesson to also learn and integrate into our consumerism. Why so much? Why right now is the time, especially with this new kind of movement of people going NA, non-alcoholic beverages. Like people are trying to slow down. Where we're seeing the research, right, that millennials, I think, are the largest alcohol consumers of all history. And like people will make fun of it being like, well, I mean, life has been tough. That's what we use. And I get it. And we also know that that's not the most positive coping mechanism. Anyways, that's kind of I'm going on a tangent, but I pay attention to these things that like, you know, our consumerism. So yeah, it's slowing down is what it's teaching us.
Well, and also what comes up for me when you were speaking is this notion that the same way we reduce down a plant and extract just one specialization of it, we do that with people too. So
I thank you for touching on that. I have written about that a little bit, and I personally compare the maguey plant to migrant people, to immigrant people, because it's so resilient. Like, talk about like it'll weather the storm. It will survive. It will do anything to survive. Like, it doesn't take a lot of water, and and that's what like this new economy, agave economy, holds on to. That's like, oh, it's a water drought tolerant plant. And it's like, okay, but that's, you can't, but you're monocropping. So how is that? It doesn't match. Anyways, on the side. But yes, I do see it as like, when the fires in LA happened and we saw that like migrant folks, Mexican people came from Mexico, right, to help put out those fires. It is this thing, it was upsetting for me because I'm like, why do we keep giving? And it's like, it's in our nature to give. And yet some people will never recognize that. And they will, in fact, say like, that, we're here to take jobs, for example, but do the most arduous, most hard work. And yet I also say, like, if given a chance, if actually nurtured and cared for and built a relationship, we can do way more than just be hard workers. And we are. But I think with people's mentality of, just putting things in a box and extracting a specialization or just one thing that it can do, we're losing so much on life.
Well, as we bring our conversation to a close, and we could talk all day about this, it's been such a beautiful conversation. What can folks do to support you at this time? And how can they be gifted the opportunity to be involved in this amazing movement that you're a part of?
Well, they can start by checking out our website. It's www.mioaxaca.org, which is Oaxaca. I know sometimes people don't know how to pronounce Oaxaca. I'm like, it's Oaxaca. Kind of like guacamole, but like it's Oaxaca.org. And we have our programs there. So our 6-week course, we have our third cohort starts October 8th. We have under the events section, our Galaguetza, which is Friday, October 17th. If folks can't attend because they're not local, they can still contribute to the Galaguetza campaign, which we'll have until December 31st of this year. So that's one way to contribute. Our social media handles are also there, so folks can check that out. We have a lot of education, a lot of storytelling on our social media as well, in particular on Instagram, which is at mi.oaxaca. They can also find that link in our website. So a lot of our stuff is on the website. Follow, share, get on our email list if you want to learn about our offerings. We don't spam. We do quarterly emails right now. We're still small. And we've been doing this for a few years and committed to it. So, as long as we still have listeners and people signing up and of course like funds to do that, then we'll be here. So check us out.
And I can imagine sharing with folks who might be planning a trip to Oaxaca or planning to go to a Oaxacan restaurant in the Bay or wherever they live, these resources could be really, really beneficial for them before they engage.
Yes. And we do have a visitor guide as well. When people contribute $25 or more, they'll automatically get a visitor guide.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners as parting words as we bring our conversation to a close?
I mean, considering that it's next economy, lift economy, that I say just like stay focused. These times are tough, but I do think that we will get through them. There are a lot of things that we need to unlearn and just leave in the past. We can't bring everything with us and just focus on what we can bring into the future, because I feel like that's what these moments are asking of us right now, and to just be in harmony with each other. We're all different plants. We all have different gifts, and just let's protect each other.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this morning. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the stories you're telling. So appreciate you, Fabiola.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation and are looking to dive even deeper into the B Corp movement, you'll love our new podcast, Beyond the B, hosted by Lyft Economy's Amy Allison and me, Ryan Honeyman. Beyond the B is your insider's guide to the B Corp movement. You'll learn about the new B Corp standards shaping our community, how the B Corp movement is navigating the various tensions and challenges of growth, and how businesses like Patagonia are putting their commitments to people and planet in practice. Check out our latest episodes and free resources at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can also subscribe to Beyond the Bee on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.